Hey everyone, welcome to this week's Health Made Simple show episode. As per usual, I'm going to share this out so that everybody can jump on with us on Facebook. While I'm doing that, say hi. Let me know where you're calling in from, how your week's been. I have had an awesome week over here because the weather is warming up, so I'm pretty excited about that. So I'm just preparing this. Thank you. Yes, it was my birthday on Sunday. So so thank you very much. I spent the day chilling out on the beach and having a lovely breakfast out by the water. So I'm definitely, that's one of my favorite places to be. Okay. Show. Excited for tonight's show, whatever it is. We're going to still be talking about autoimmune. So it's just going to be me and Bart, but we're still going to be diving into autoimmune. So if you guys have questions on autoimmune or anything like that, let us know. We are going to be taking questions on that. So yeah, if you do have some autoimmune questions, feel free to put them in the chat. If you are listening already on Facebook, we're talking about autoimmune tonight. So if you have any questions for us, just type them in. We will be able to get them answered. We've got time to make sure that we get some of those answered for you. So we can do that because it's a topic that isn't always very well understood. I feel like I always get lots of people talking to me about it, and a lot of people don't realize certain conditions are even autoimmune related. So we're going to dive into some of that. Also, this week, since Dr. Bart always has his puppies on the show, I'm going to show you guys my puppy. So for those of you who are on already, come here, Molly. Come here. So I like to stand when I'm on the show. Yes, this is Molly. So this is Molly's debut on the show, but since Bart sits and I've got to stand, so she's got to hang here with me. So I don't think she's going to last that long on the show this week. But yeah, Molly, welcome to the show. I know she can maybe do a feature. Hey, Dr. Bart, we've got Molly on the show today.
Nice, Molly. All right.
Yeah. We've always got your puppies, so Molly's coming, except she's kind of just wanting to flop on my arm there, and I got to pick her up. So I'm going to put her back down, but she's excited for the show.
That's awesome. What is she? What kind of dog is she?
She's a Groodle. So a Groodle, Golden Retriever cross poodle.
Nice.
Yeah.
Love it.
So, yes. Awesome. So autoimmune tonight.
Yeah, it's exciting. You know, Karen, this is a big topic. This is bigger than people really think moving forward. So I'm glad we're ending up that you and I are doing this topic. We have some changes, which is all good. We're always ready to adjust, adapt, and execute. So, but by itself, maybe the audience, maybe the people that are on here tonight get it. This is going to be huge. So again, do your thing. Everyone that's listening here tonight, spread this out, continue, spread love, share it out, because autoimmune will probably be the biggest topic over the next 5 to 10 years, hands down. We've gone through different phases of different hot topics in healthcare. Autoimmune is the next big one. And unfortunately, it is not going away. We'll dive into that, why. But anyone who's had an autoimmune condition, this is your night. So if you got questions, I want you to ask. I'm going to cover, Karen, what I consider the top 5 that I see clinically There's more than that, no doubt about it. There's probably about 100 different autoimmune conditions at this point. We'll dive deep as we want. And again, if you guys are here on live, if you're watching on Facebook and you want to ask us questions live, go ahead and shoot those questions. Someone on the team will forward them to me. I'll do my best always to answer the questions, and especially tonight, just so you, and I know everyone knows this, but just keep in mind, I'm going to give you tidbits, but I'm not acting as your doctor here tonight, but I do want to give you, and I say that I have to give you that disclaimer, because at the same time, I want to give you stuff that you can take away and start doing stuff safe and effective and powerful when it comes to leveling up your own health. So that's my disclaimer always, that remember, I'm not acting as your doctor here tonight. We're just, giving his best great information I can to help you level up and become as close to superhuman as can be. So Karen, you let me know if we're ready to rock and roll, or are we live on Facebook yet?
We're ready to rock and roll. So welcome everyone to another episode of the Health Made Simple show. As always, I want to start by introducing our host, Dr. Bart, who has been a healthcare provider for over 20 years, practicing a range of modalities, including chiropractic, acupuncture, kinesiology, nutrition and supplementation, and functional testing out of his clinic, Balance Health Studio in Seagrove Beach, Florida. He's also the founder of the Health Edge program, which is a virtual health program for entrepreneurs and executives wanting to take their health to the next level. So he's worked with thousands of people around the world, celebrities, athletes, both virtually, just like this on Zoom, as well as in his clinic. So we are excited to tap into all your experience and knowledge on this topic today. We're already getting some questions in, and I think we will, because it's, as you said, it's becoming more and more prevalent. More and more people are going to start to be diagnosed with these conditions, and so I think it's really important to talk about it.
Yeah, autoimmune again is a huge topic. Unfortunately, and we're going to tackle it tonight, that the biggest thing that goes with it is said that we don't know why it gets there, and that you're going to have to kind of deal with it. And really, the outlook is almost always, the prognosis is it's going to get worse over time. And so for everyone that's ever had that prognosis or diagnosis, and listen, there's a lot of them out there. Well, again, I'm going to talk about our top 5 that I think are clinically most prevalent, but bring yours up if you have them. Yet the reality is that we thought that so often these were genetic based. And again, we're going to dive into that conversation. Really not. But I want people to walk away tonight with a couple action steps, which I'm going to give you near the end of this, and then also a couple understandings of what autoimmune condition is. And here's what we know, is that if you understand what's taking place, and I think that's fundamentally the big issue right now. I don't think a lot of practitioners, oh man, this is going to sound bad, but I don't think they know enough about human body and human physiology to really put it all together to understand what's taking place when we have an autoimmune condition. So tonight, hopefully you're going to be able to walk away with action steps and feeling confident that, listen, you can, inevitably, Karen, someone's going to ask tonight, can you cure it? And the answer, the word cure probably isn't the one that I would use, because I can't. I legally can't use that word.
Yeah.
I want you to think of it this way. What if you just got rid of your symptoms for the rest of your life? Even if we didn't call it a cure, that means you'll be good. And that can, that's a certainty. So so I'm looking forward to diving into this. And again, I suspect this will be, when we go through the top 5, each one of those, quite frankly, could easily be a night itself. Yeah,
for sure. Okay, well, let's talk about what is it? What is an autoimmune condition? What are we even talking about?
So an autoimmune condition, just so our listeners have a fundamental understanding, is literally when your immune system starts to attack you. It's not even waiting for a pathogen or an invader to be in their body, but your immune system, your white blood cells, actually start to attack your own cells. So that's what autoimmune condition is. And I want to give kind of thanks or credit to really who founded this. So this is interesting. So many of you know I use a company often for my vitamins, my herbs, my extracts, a company called Standard Process. Well, the founder of Standard Process, his name was Dr. Royal Lee. And Royal Lee was a scientist, and quite frankly, he was a genius. Well, back in the 1940s, he came up, there's papers written on it, it's crazy. And he said, the body's entering a phase of autoimmunity where it's fighting itself, killing off its own cells. In that moment, when that happened, they basically wanted to disbar him. They wanted to get rid of his license because they said that's insane. The body would never attack itself. And that was in the early 1940s. And then finally, I think it was in 1957, nearly 20 years later, they finally discovered and said, there's a condition called autoimmune where the body actually attacks itself. So a lot of this information was founded way, way back before that. And what's interesting, and this is still going to hold true to even what I say tonight, listen, the foundation of everything, he said that autoimmune wasn't caused by anything but one thing, and it was nutrient deficiencies.
Wow.
Deficiency for the body to do its job, and then it created all kinds of ailments. But that's just kind of a little credit where credit's due.
Yeah. Wow. And, sometimes that really does take time, doesn't it? We have these pioneers who find things and talk things through, and we try and get that information out, but it takes a while for things to catch up. And something we were talking about earlier is that often, and kind of you touched on this, often they're not managed very well. Why is there so much confusion around this? Or when you go to your doctor, why do people get these, they get this prognosis that they can't do anything about it?
So this is where it gets a little interesting. And oftentimes, so someone like myself who practice, we'll call a little bit outside of the box. I'm a holistic practitioner, use kinesiology and all these functional tests. It's not uncommon that when someone comes to me, they're upset and they'll say, I've been to 4, 5, 10 doctors and no one else is doing it. And listen, it's not because I'm any smarter. And then this is my point here. Autoimmune conditions are tricky. And they're tricky because when they first start, they can have widespread, as we'll talk through the conversation tonight, autoimmune conditions can affect anything, everything. So when you go to the one doctor with one symptom and they say, oh, well, let's try this. And they weren't incorrect in like going after that particular thing. But then it also had another leg and another leg and another leg. And because you weren't looking at it holistically, all of a sudden, you spend years, thousands and thousands of dollars in tests and lab tests. And worse off, all of that aside from itself, you feel like heck through all this time. So the average person typically goes to 6 to 10 doctors before they get a definitive diagnosis in one of the autoimmune conditions.
And then once they get that diagnosis,
once they get the diagnosis, then it gets a little tricky there as well, because typically they get it. And for those of you, I already see some questions coming up here. You get that diagnosis and they say, listen, we don't know why it got there. And tonight I want to kind of demyth that and say, we do know. And because we're smart enough to understand how the human body is designed to work. And we also understand that there's this thing called your innate intelligence, which we have to understand a little bit more to understand how it gets off track here. But there are things that we do, and we don't understand. See, our challenge, Karen, is that we think that we have to put like the pin on one dot and say, this was the thing that caused it. But that is not how autoimmune conditions start. It's usually a downregulation of many different things. So the two things that are going to come a common thread here that you're going to see. So everyone, if you want me to talk about your autoimmune, there's two common themes in every autoimmune. And one is that there's some level of interference. And we'll talk about the 4 kind of causes and you'll see that each one of these cause some type of interference between the mind and the body. Really what I mean, and it's going to sound funky, but it means that there's some level of interference in the innate immune system. The innate immune system, or the innate system by itself. And that is that God within, that is that intelligence that we're born with, that thank goodness it's working, because otherwise I'd be in charge of every cell, tissue, and organ in my body, and that wouldn't work. So there's interference, and then with every autoimmune condition, there's some level of chronic inflammation. It is those two things that have to be our target. And how do we remove the interference? How do we improve the inflammation?
Okay. So as we said, we're gonna go dive into kind of 4 kind of main causes. But before we do that, what about genetics? Like a lot of people who do go, they're like, oh, it's genetic, it runs in my family, I'm gonna get it, we all have it.
Yeah, so that's very common as well. So, well, these are genetic, and here's the nice thing: we now know again that it isn't genetics. It is not genetics. Really, what it is, it's epigenetics. That means the unraveling of our mitochondria. That is our lifestyle. So, if in the event, now listen, we may have a genetic code that makes us vulnerable to something like MS, like Hashimoto's. Well, not so much Hashimoto's, but maybe some other conditions. But we may be vulnerable for these if our epigenetics, our lifestyle, how we're going about life isn't serving us. And if it's something that's breaking down the human body, that mitochondria unravels, it expresses that gene. So hopefully the audience is understanding what I'm saying, is that just because you have a gene, it does not mean you're going to have that. I came to my office today. Someone came in with some lab tests with this a gene that makes you more, potential to have breast cancer.
Yeah.
Panicked. Like literally, she had breast cancer, but she doesn't. She has a gene that basically gives us a forewarning about lifestyle. And that's what genes do for us. They give a precursor of saying, if you go off the track, you're going to get one thing. If you go on track, you can have another thing. So I put to bed that myth that all autoimmune conditions are genetic, because they're really not.
Yeah. You might have a predisposition to something, but depending on which lifestyle choices you take, might depend on whether you have symptoms and that's something you suffer with, or whether you don't, right? It's, yeah,
absolutely. Yep.
Okay, so let's dive into these 4 causes, or these kind of, 4 main causes that we kind of see that lead to or kind of contribute to an autoimmune condition.
And as we do that, what's interesting here is that often people have more than one of these.
Yeah.
Often they have all 4. So we really got to look at that. And that, I think, is why, when people are trying to heal these up and no one's really identifying these, they don't even know where to start. So they're just trying to downregulate symptoms. And the symptom is the very, very last thing. So the first one, Karen, is, and these are really no particular order. I think the third one I'm going to mention is probably the number one. Number one is, the first one, I should say, is infections, both bacterial and viral. Let me explain it. Really, I'm looking at the chronic ones, especially things like candida, bacterial that's taking place in the body. We're looking at things like stealth pathogens, Epstein Barr, Lyme's disease, spirochetes, helminths. These stealth pathogens that lie in the body for potentially decades. Thing about self pathogens, and you asked me when we were talking earlier, like, how do I test for stealth pathogens? And I'll tell you up front, folks, there's no easy testing for stealth pathogens. Let me explain why. Stealth pathogens, are intelligent pathogens within the body. They recognize how your immune system works. They recognize your white blood cells. And this is the way they work. Take, for example, like an Epstein Barr. The Epstein Barr virus comes out and about. It recognizes your white blood cells and it hides deep within the cell, hides deep within different places, like your thyroid gland, like your liver. Then now that Epstein Barr is making that gland vulnerable for breakdown, for tissue death from the inside out. And that's one of the things that starts to stem this autoimmune condition. So stealth pathogens within the body create one interference, because they're interfering with the way the body works. They're taking over other cells, just like we hear about viruses right now a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And what is that one they call right now?
What's a big one right now? Oh, coronavirus.
Virus, yeah. We hear that viruses need a host. They need to overlap one. And when that does that, it interferes with the message that's going to the brain. So that cell is a compromised cell. That's what Epstein Barr likes to do. It overlaps other cells and it takes over the DNA. That's the interference that I'm talking about. Once it has that interference, wherever that virus lands, and it can go anywhere in the body, it'll start to downregulate that organ. So those stealth pathogens, they're difficult. So there's Epstein Barr tests, there's all kinds of tests, but you got to catch it when the virus is out. If it's hiding, you don't even recognize you'll have it. You'll just test positive that you've had the antibodies. And that's why people with Epstein Barr, man, they scratch their heads. The beauty, Karen, is this, and I mentioned this off air as well. 10 years ago, when I was trying to tackle Lyme disease, when I was trying to tackle Epstein Barr, brutal, difficult. It was so, we didn't really have a good grasp in it. Now, we use in our clinic, and many practitioners use very specific stealth pathogen protocols. We use herbs like myrrh, artemisinin, virinon, St. John's, very specific groups. And here's the kicker on it. We almost want to outwit these. And I know we're getting off track here a little bit. We almost need to outwit the stealth pathogen. And the way that we do that is through what we call pulse dosing. We take the herb, we put it in there, kicks out and kills whatever's there, but the guys hide. So we take that one out and we put a different herb in. So we bring it back and forth. So we just keep poking its head up and we keep giving it a punch in the head. And we do these protocols for like 90 days at a time, and then you take a break and you do it again. And you just go through this, and next thing you know, you've wiped out that virus or that pathogen. So that's number one. We'll keep rolling here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Number two, drugs and medication.
Yeah.
So again, I said the two top things: interference and inflammation. Listen, no matter what the cause of or the need for a drug or medication, I think we're all intelligent enough to understand that it's overriding something in the body. And that is another way for saying it's interfering with something that's going on in the body. So that by itself, just chronic or, years of a medication can create an interference, and that interference allows the body or creates this breakdown potential. So that's kind of the second one. So it's almost like kind of like a no-brainer, drugs and medications, especially things like antibiotics, Karen. Antibiotics just wipe out entire colonies of microbiome in one shot completely. You could take one round, wipe out an entire colony, bring in some toxic food, and just that sequence of events. It was innocent. You needed it. You had a sinus infection. That one shot has that potential to just kind of wipe out a colony. Now you're interfering, and then with that interference, like when we use an antibiotic, shortly after that usually creates an inflammatory marker within the gut. Steroids, another good one. Like if people understood really what a steroid does, steroid is essentially shutting down the way the immune system is working. We're shutting off the immune system, and we're kind of pumping in a cortisol. So we're telling the body, hey, don't respond, shut off, shut down. When we do a steroid and you have stealth pathogens. So I want everyone to understand how this happened. And there's no guilt and shame here. Just understand this product. Let's just say that you're taking a steroid over here. Let's just say 15 years ago, you were exposed to a virus, a stealth pathogen, a parasite, something's in your body. In the moment that you take that steroid and you shut down that immune response, they run wild. Yeah. You've woke the beast up. Even though your immune system had them at bay, now they get to express themselves. So maybe you've got some skin issues. You took a steroid for it, and maybe it helped the skin, but you woke up the beast. And now those pathogens, now those viruses get to go kind of wreak havoc on another part of the body and another part of the body. So that's really number two. Number three is really number one. We could just say that probably 90% of autoimmune conditions go down to the gut, specifically leaky gut. And a simple, I guess kind of like a simple explanation of that, Karen, is we take things into our body. And we'll talk about the different foods that might not be great, like gluten. We take things into the body, and because our microbiome, the gut flora, the microvilli, those are all the things that make up on the inside of the small and large intestine. Those are all beat up. Processed foods, medications, drugs, these chemicals. What's that one they put on the grass every day?
Glyphosate.
Glyphosate.
Yeah.
Absolutely brutal on the human microbiome. So listen, maybe you've never had an antibiotic in your life, but the only thing you do is walk barefooted on a golf course. You will take in so much glyphosate. Hey, just walk a golf course. You're taking in so much chemicals, but that stuff, you walk in the grass that's been sprayed with Roundup and all that kind of stuff. Taking so much glyphosate into your body, it all goes to your liver, breaks down the microbiome. And when that happens, your intestines literally don't have anything blocking it, and it leaks literally the food that you're eating, even though it's good, leaks through your intestines and ends up in parts of the body it wasn't supposed to be.
Yeah.
Once that happens, your immune system says, whoa, fella, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be in this body part. We're going to attack you, kill you, because the innate system says, you're not supposed to belong here. We're going to take care of you.
Yeah.
So that's where that innate wisdom is doing its job, but it's almost a hyper reaction because of the leaky gut.
And we were talking before, leaky gut is again more and more prevalent. There's so many people that have this from all these things that you might not be aware of. And I think when we talk about medications and glyphosate, I mean, it's or any of these things, sometimes we are exposed to them or we do have to take them, but it's that awareness that this could be causing it, or that awareness that, hey, we might need to do something about it. Back on the stealth passengers, actually, we got a question from Patty just saying, can you test from Epstein Barr? So she just wrote on Facebook that, can we test for it?
For Epstein Barr, absolutely. The
Yeah.
challenge here is the timing of your test.
Yeah,
So
okay.
Here's what I would say. I think it's as high as 60 or 70% of Americans test positive for the antibodies of Epstein Barr. It's pretty high. So it means you've been exposed to it. So I know one time when I got tested and I was like, Epstein Barr, I don't know, but I tested positive for not active, but positive.
Okay.
That means you have that autoimmune condition, which means, let's say, I'll take myself, for example. When I get my lifestyle, my epigenetics breaks down, it is vulnerable for that Epstein Barr to go wreak havoc on my adrenal glands, on my thyroid gland, on anything. So having a test, there's a lot of specific Epstein Barr tests. Really, you just do an Epstein Barr test to find out if you have the antibodies. Even if they're not positive, you have them. And when you get too tired, when you get too stressed out, you got the poor diet, that becomes a vulnerability for you.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. Patty, let us know. And a lot of you have questions on conditions. So we are going to get to those when we talk about some of the specific conditions. We'll go through those ones for you. But first, we didn't do the fourth one, right? Fourth cause. We kind of touched on it, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, the fourth is toxins.
Yeah. Perfect.
And listen, toxins. I don't know if we can avoid this one, but we can do our best. We can be intelligent about this, and this predominantly through diet. So there's all kinds, and I'll tell you, and I think, again, worthy of a show by itself, but understanding heavy metals and how to get rid of them out of our body. But if you have heavy metals, poisoning in your body, you got heavy metals in your brain, that type of interference is chronically causing inflammation in their body. And that inflammation means you are chronically engaging your immune system. You're creating a vulnerability there. You break down the tissue. The tissue then starts to float around in the system. The system says, you're not supposed to be there, Mr. Tissue. And then it starts to attack it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, let's move into these more specific autoimmune conditions. So we talked about kind of the top 5 that you see in clinic, the top 5 that we kind of see people talking about or suffering with. Let's start with some of those, and then we've got a couple more conditions as well that people are kind of talking about in the chat. So maybe we'll then move on to those ones and add those in.
Okay.
Good?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Make sure that at some point, Karen, you add, there's one herb that anybody with an autoimmune condition has to be on, period. And I'll talk about that when we get wherever that is.
Okay.
And then also something else that if you know you have an autoimmune condition very specifically for a gland, your thyroid, your liver, your adrenals, your skin, whatever it may be, there's something very specific that will need to be on there as well. All right, so number 1, again, no specific order here. And I'm sure someone listening to this tonight, whether on Facebook or here live on Zoom, this is going to be you. It's colitis. It could be ulcerative colitis. These are autoimmune conditions. Crohn's or inflammatory bowel syndrome. Those all kind of get wrapped in together. That is a very, very common one that we see. The diagnosis happens quite frequently. And that by itself is an autoimmune condition that can create inflammation. Here we go again, anywhere in the intestinal tract. You typically see it in the bottom end of the small intestine and the large intestine, but it could be anywhere in the intestinal tract.
Okay. And so people with these type of ones, is there anything specific for these guys that different to the other ones, like that we need to make sure they know about? Or
yeah, there really is. So each one of these, each autoimmune condition has kind of its own like specific, like, all right, I got to take this direction with this one. There's a global approach to them all, which I'm going to make sure when we finish this, we're going to go through. If you have an autoimmune condition, you got to do at least these 4 things, and then specific. So things like when you have ulcerative colitis, one of the first things you got to tackle is if you have a candida issue, you got to tackle. So what does that mean? Sugar. That means your simple carbohydrates. You got to stop feeding it. But it gets interesting with ulcerative colitis, which is going to be different than some of our other dietary ones. So usually with something like this or irritable bowel, inflammatory bowel, I got to pull things like nuts and seeds out. That's going to be important. We're going to use some very specific type of vitamins essentially for this. Your probiotics, your fermented foods are important. But here's an important one, especially for my people that are really striving to be healthy and they have this gut issue and have been diagnosed with. No raw food.
Yeah. Okay.
Food is too tough on the intestines. So if you have Crohn's and stuff like that, like eating big plates of kale and spinach, even though I'm a huge advocate of veggies, it's going to be too tough on your digestive system. So we really got to be mindful of that. So eating warm foods, blended foods, sauteed foods, slightly cooked foods, much more conducive to creating a healthy environment for the gut. So then, of course, with these guys, when that inflammation is in there, your microbiome has been beat down and beat up. So we start with some kind of regimen of a pre and probiotic. And even if you don't want to take a pill or a tablet, listen, fermented foods like the sauerkraut and the kimchi, these are fantastic to be doing. You can get a little kombucha. The first 30 days, I typically will put someone on a supplement versus those. Reason being is that I'm trying to get that candida harnessed.
Yeah.
So usually these go hand in hand. I'll see those irritable bowel syndromes, Crohn's and stuff often link up with some type of candida. Maybe not, but we got to get that out of there. How do those guys typically get there? I say 9 out of 10 times it's antibiotic use and steroid use.
Yeah, which is so common, right? And so these things you're talking about, like even let's just take raw food for someone with this, is that something they're going to have to cut out forever? Or is this like a protocol?
No, this is a rebuilding. So I want you to think like that you have to almost go through a rehab for your gut.
Yeah.
To goodness, when we really talk about rehab, it was great. I had a guy in today and he said to me, Doc, you know what? I appreciate your, pushing me along the same way. And you sound like a broken record at times. God's garden, blah, 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 blah. He tells me, yeah, it just took me a year to fix my gut. He's like, I feel like a different human being.
Yeah, wow.
Healing, to really fix and heal your gut. You'll feel way better before a year, but I'm talking about fixing it. But if you have your gut 9 months, a year of just doing these kind of strategies, and for example, with with this one Crohn's, I love intermittent fasting for this.
Yeah. Okay.
That speeds this whole game up. So again, that's where some of the strategies I wouldn't put that in there, but for this autoimmune condition, absolutely. Intermittent fasting. Reduce the carbs, reduce the sugar, get that stuff out there, introduce some of the probiotic and prebiotic foods a little bit down the road. There's a weapon here, it's one of my favorites, something called Chlorophyll Complex. Maybe you put that in the notes for the people. Chlorophyll essentially is like plant's blood. This is if you have any colitis, if you've got ulcerative colitis, if you've got ulcers, this is the medicine. I'm not going to call it medicine. This is the herb. It's not an herb. It's plant blood. It's green. This is what heals it. This is absolutely fantastic, and it helps line, it coats and soothes the intestinal lining, creates an environment, balances out the pH, and reduces pain. Anyone here who's had Crohn's, who've had colitis or ulcerative colitis, painful, very painful, like not gut hurt pain, like buckled over on the ground. You think someone's got a knife in your gut pain. And because you're creating crevices that are cracking on the inside there, that the intestines are getting beat up.
Yeah. And as we talk about some of these supplements, we've just added the link in the chat. So if you guys want to know where you can get some of these, we've added the link in the chat. We'll add it into Facebook too, so that you can just click straight through and get some of these if you're dealing with some of this some of this stuff. Okay. So what's the next one that you see?
This is probably a popular one. We speak about a lot here. Hashimoto's. Hashimoto's is a hypothyroid condition caused by an autoimmune situation where the body is literally attacking the thyroid gland, is attacking the cells of the thyroid, and also attacks the thyroid hormone. So, Karen, this is one of those ones, and I think I'm kind of beating this. If you guys have been with me week to week, I say, listen, if you're going to run a thyroid panel, I swear last week we talked about thyroid panel. The following day, I got one back from just, someone brought in their thyroid panel and just had one marker, TSH. You have to have the whole marker, folks. If you run especially ladies, please listen to me. If you run a thyroid panel, it is pointless to run. Pointless. It's pointless to run if you do not run your antibodies with it, because the prevalence of Hashimoto's with hypothyroidism, it's like 70%.
Yeah, wow.
If you have that autoimmune condition, if you have Hashimoto's, we have to be addressing it. We have to downregulate it. Otherwise, your thyroid gland will be getting beat up because of the autoimmune condition, not because of lack of hormones. That being said, with Hashimoto's, if you can get this early enough, like you're just doing an annual thyroid test, you don't even have a problem yet, you can save the gland. People that run Hashimoto's year after year after year, they're just doing other things for it. That gland can get so beat up, Karen, we may not be able to avoid medication because it glands up so much that it can't produce the T4, the thyroxine. So if you're going to run a thyroid test, there's about 9 different markers that we got to run to make sure we can really accurately understand. Again, we talked about this last week, but understand, is this an adrenal issue? Is this a liver issue? Is this a gut issue? Is this an autoimmune condition? So very, very easy to test for. Very inexpensive as well.
Yeah. We were talking earlier. I'm surprised. Yeah, they don't run it with it. It should, as you said, it should be standard. They should run it all the time. But we were also talking with Hashimoto's. There's some specifics we want to make sure we cut out of our diets too. We're talking about how gluten, specifically more for Hashimoto's, is something we really want to make sure, really potentially forever, we want to avoid that one.
It is, and if you're diagnosed with Hashimoto's, you are gluten-free for the most part forever, and I'll explain why. So one, it shouldn't surprise you that I say that, because we always go back to God's garden, and the reason for God's garden is because it gives the best opportunity to get the best nutrients so you can be the best human being possible. So if we just went from the premise of nutrients, there's really no need for us to have gluten because we're just not going to get any nutrients from it. That being said, specifically, if you have Hashimoto's, here's the challenge. Inevitably, there's probably a little leaky gut there. In the gluten molecular structure, let's say it looks like this, right? Your thyroid, T4, if you want to call it, thyroxine, kind of looks like this. So when the gluten comes in the body attacks the gluten, especially as it leaks through the intestinal wall and gets into places it shouldn't be. Your white blood cells come attack this. Now, if your thyroxine, right? If your thyroid hormone is floating around the bloodstream, it attacks it as well. And then it also attacks the gland. So the gluten molecule will wake up your immune system to be on hyper alert, to be looking out for this. So the more gluten you have, the more downregulated your thyroid gland will get. So you just got to stay off this because you're almost waking up that autoimmune condition.
And when it comes to gluten, I mean, this will be a little sidetrack, but something we were chatting about was celiac disease. So even because one, what's celiac, but two, people often get tested for something like celiac and then think, if that comes back negative, they say, I'm good for gluten. So even if they have Hashimoto's or something, they're like, I tested for that. I'm okay to eat gluten.
Yeah, so that happens often. So for everyone listening tonight, Karen's saying, so what happens to the person that comes back and says, hey, my doctor tested me for celiac disease, which is an autoimmune condition, and it says I don't, and can I eat gluten? No, you still can't eat it. Just still don't buy into it. And just because you don't have instant belly bloat, but one of the biggest things that gluten causes is internal inflammation.
Yeah.
earlier, interference and inflammation. And that always happens chronically. So people with Hashimoto's often have fatigue. That's where the weight gain comes from the inflammation, comes from the brain, that brain fog, all of that stuff that creates interference and inflammation. That's all those symptoms. And so many people that have thyroid issues can relate to all of those because they just keep getting more symptoms. You know, Karen, I didn't mention it earlier, but the challenge, all kinds of dogs here. The other challenge with these autoimmune conditions, now we're seeing that person who has one within 5 years gets their second, 2 more years gets their third, because the whole body, it's not just that organ. It's not just the thyroid gland. It's not just, the liver. It's not just the skin. It's really a whole body approach here that we're going to take. And when we get to near the end, we're going to give strategy, of course.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, well, let's move on to the next one, which was also one of the questions we got in the chat here, which was psoriasis. That was the condition we were going to talk about. And maybe we can start with the question we've got here is, I've had psoriasis since the age of 13. What are some steps to take to finally alleviate the symptoms?
Love it. Well, good for you for being on here. And so here's a couple things. One, it is an autoimmune condition. Absolutely, positively. Sometimes, so that's why just putting things on the skin, and you've been down this road, that doesn't work. So psoriasis is my number 3 here. Are we on number 3? Yeah. So this is an autoimmune condition. One of the strategies. So hear me out. And again, I'm going to give it a top 4 for everything. But for psoriasis, I love intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
That's number 1. We've got to increase our fats. We've got to get good fats. And this is a scenario I'd say absolutely positively you need more essential fatty acids. Remember, dermatome, skin, right underneath that is essential fatty acids. Fascia, more essential fatty acids. We need a double layer of good fats in our skin, otherwise it'll break down. So good fat in our diet's really good. I love Mediterranean diets for this. I love, we could do paleo. You could even do keto, depending on who you are and kind of what you're doing. Love intermittent fasting. Love collagen here. Always go back to gut liver. This is a leaky gut issue, 100%. Gluten is a goner for you. Dairy is a goner for you. And the interesting thing about the dairy is you could probably at some point get some of the organic cheeses back. That won't be a big deal because there's very little lactose. But at this point, you become pretty much inflamed to a lot of those different things. Gluten, dairy, you may, if you're doing all of these things, you're doing them all and you say, hey, doc, I'm nailing it. All those things you mentioned, I still got my psoriasis. You have to sleep. Your skin will heal when you sleep, not during the day. And the second part, you may consider running a food sensitivity test. But don't run the food sensitivity test unless you're doing everything I said. Because they're expensive, and I say they're expensive because it's a $300 lab test. It's so easy. It's an at-home test. You prick your finger, blot it, send it out, comes back in 7 days, you get a list of all your food sensitivities. So that could be a sneaky one behind there. But anything that causes the interference, anything that causes the inflammation, don't discount what I just said. If you have psoriasis, we got to sleep good, we got to act good, we got to move good, we got to eat good, we got to eat clean. So I hope that kind of gives some insight. We'll talk about diet just a little bit more here. The dietary restrictions, so when you have, the colitis is in Crohn's, it's a little more restrictive. The psoriasis isn't as restrictive. Yet, same thing. If I even think or sniff out the fact I think there's candida in there, we get it gone. And who do I think has candida? Everybody?
Yeah.
And I don't mean that bad way, but think of it. Most of us been eating carbs most of our lives. Most of us have taken at least a couple rounds of antibiotics.
Yeah.
That bad bacteria build up. It just makes sense. So with that being said, if you haven't done those steps yet, I think those are great beginning points. And listen, I tell you what, I've seen so many people really do a really, really good job with psoriasis, change their lives. I tell you what, I need to at least mention this. You're probably not going to understand this fully, but I at least want to throw it out there for those people that are looking for streamlines here. There is a product I use through standard process, and they're called Pmgs, protomorphogens. They have very specific protomorphogens for different body parts. They have one for the skin. They got one for the thyroid. They got one for the adrenal gland. They got one for the liver. They got one for the kidney. Those protomorphogens are a key to my success with these different autoimmune conditions. You only take 1 or 2 on an empty stomach right before you go to bed. That's typically what I'll do. And that will distract those white blood cells that are targeting your cells. So I know it's a little confusing here, but there's something called a protomorphogen. So in this scenario, when they ask about psoriasis, my skin cases, I always use something called dermatrophin PMG. That being said, remember, I'm not acting as your doctor tonight. I'm just giving some good old health advice to help you level up. And as usual, Karen, just like we tell our audience every week, if whether you reach out to a practitioner or you reach out to me, I'd be happy to help you out. But if you're dealing with an autoimmune condition, again, this is where I'd say get with someone. Make sure you got a good strategy and you look at the whole picture here. It is not just the symptom on the skin, not by any means. So hopefully that helps a little bit of psoriasis there.
Yeah, and we'll put some details in the chat because people don't have to be in Florida or in Seagrove Beach to work with you, right? You can work with people all over the country.
Yeah, absolutely, Karen. So anyone, anywhere, just like we're doing now, we send them forms digitally and all that kind of good stuff. And then we can even order lab tests for us, send them directly to you, no matter where you're at. And then once we get all that stuff in, or if you have stuff you want to send, we do that. And then we get on one of these, we do Zoom. And that way I still get to see, I can see, things like skin, whatnot. We do that. And then, so you can be anywhere you want.
Okay. Couple of follow-up questions on skin. How long can you take the PMG, the dermatological PMG?
When you have an autoimmune condition, for the most part, I'll keep you on it. You on it. It's just
kind of ongoing. It's something that you can take. Yeah.
What it's ultimately going to do for the condition is that it will distract the antibodies. Those antibodies that are going to go after your own cells and your own tissues, it's a distractor. So they go directly toward the PMG in the stomach. And then the stomach acids play a role here and break it all down. So I'll use protomorphogens in all kind of clinical settings. Literally you get you get a concussion. I use the neurotrophin brain PMG to fix the damaged tissue in the brain. But when we know that is always going to be there, just a low, steady dose, I can keep it there until, listen, if it goes away 100%, stop using it.
Yeah, cool. We've got Sam also asking here, what about rosacea? Rosacea, is that how I say it?
Yeah, rosacea, yeah.
That's good, thank you.
Same thing, anything skin, that's a dermatrophin PMG. The rosacea that you might see, like it's affiliated with something like a lupus or the butterfly rash, we see a fair amount of that as well. It's not my top list here. Same thing, once it starts to affect the skin, we affect the skin. We go after the skin, but that's about as much symptom chasing that we do. The rest of it is definitely a holistic approach, no matter what that is. Right now, Karen, there's about 100 different autoimmune. Now, that being said, 15 years ago, there was like 70. So they keep coming because they're affecting more parts of the human body that we're starting to understand. Oh, there's more antibodies, and that one goes to the skin. There's more antibody. That one goes to the circulatory system. So there's we're going to keep getting more.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, let's move on to the next one. Then we were talking about, which was rheumatoid arthritis. It's a common one too.
Yeah. So no doubt, food connection here.
Yeah.
Bad stuff gets through the gut. It penetrates the wall of the intestine, floats out into an area. That toxin circulates through the body. Typically, those debris, we'll call them, land in the joints or around different bony tissue where things are a little congested anyways in terms of flow. The body attacks that area and you get a joint issue. Is it very common? So folks, just hear me out here. So this is still a food thing. They're going to say, often they don't connect this, but where do you see most rheumatoid? Right in the hands. That's
the hands,
You see the knuckles all knob up. Whatever's farthest from the heart is the most difficult to get the circulation and get the most nutrients. So when they see the rheumatoid, boom, right away, must clean the gut. You got to restore that microbiome. You got to seal up the leaky gut. And now we got to get the inflammation out of the body. Again, bone, if affecting the bone, we have something called ostrophin PMG. Now, rheumatoid arthritis is considered blood-borne, or osteoarthritis is more bone. So this one's a little bit different in terms of the protomorphogen, but that can affect any bone. But by the time it's in those knuckles, it's affecting the bone as well.
No, it's a good one to talk about, because I think that's one that people just say often, that's something that's genetic or you're going to be stuck with forever, right? A lot of people get those types of diagnoses when people say rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a little bit of a bummer because I've seen them firsthand. I've seen them halt in their place. Now, listen, if you have rheumatoid arthritis, I'm not saying that we can reverse it all, but understanding that. So the things I'm going to give you at the end are protocols that we should follow anyways in terms of strategies for just leveling up our lives, leveling up our health. Because these autoimmune conditions, as we talked in the beginning, what causes them? Chronic inflammation from infections from bacteria and viruses that we don't know we have. So that's happening. We're talking about things like leaky gut. Most people have developed or created some leaky gut, medications and drugs, and then toxins. So all of us are rolling toward an autoimmune condition.
Yeah.
So it's just literally here in our country, if we test everybody for Epstein Barr antibodies, I believe it's as close to 70% positive. Not positive, which means the moment your lifestyle gets beat down, there's an expression.
Yeah, which is why it's so important to keep leveling up, keep sharing this info, keep learning every week, and just keep taking those steps to keep making ourselves better and better versions of ourselves, right? Which is what we're all about. So the next one on our list of conditions is lupus.
Yeah, we kind of mentioned that. And lupus is interesting because it can actually land up in anywhere. That can be in your lungs, it can be in your kidney, it can be in your skin. Typically, you'll see the butterfly rash, on the face. You'll see the person has that redness, and that's an autoimmune condition. And I say those things because I see that in the office often. Those 4 or 5 are probably the most common. I'll see a lot of fibromyalgia type cases. We'll see them all, but I think those are the most prevalent ones. Probably the most prevalent in those guys. So lupus is right up in there, and really almost a repeat of everything I said. And, it's an inside out condition. We're going to look at the whole body, got to look at leaky gut, toxins, etc.
Yeah. Okay. Well, from there, let's there's a couple of people who've got some other conditions that they've asked some questions here. So why don't we have a bit of a look at some of these? We've got here one about MS. Is MS considered an autoimmune? I have 4 friends, 40s and younger. Wow, it's scary. One has passed after moving into a nursing home in his 40s from MS.
Yeah, so the answer is yes, that is autoimmune. And immediately you have to fix the gut. No one's talking about that. It's a bacterial imbalance. Absolutely, positively, you need to start ASAP. You can slow that down. And that's really what the goal is with the MS. And again, we don't necessarily make these autoimmune conditions go away, but that person who asked that question, everything we hear tonight, this applies to you and all your friends. Remember, why is MS becoming more? MS is skyrocketing up. But think about it, toxins, think about it, leaky gut, think about it, interference. Karen, we didn't even talk about 5G interfering with my brain waves. This is real. What interferes with this innate wisdom? In all of these distractors, that's what's interfering with it. And the body it ends up in this hyperimmune response, state. So yes, MS, yes, it's autoimmune. Yes, you can do something about it. And yes, the answer is now, not in a year, not after you see how some drug works. It is right here, right now.
Because also some of the things that we're talking about, if somebody did want to take the medications or go down that route, they could do some of this stuff at the same time, couldn't they? They can still change their diet, make some changes, right? You can do them together. It doesn't even have to be one or the other necessarily.
Absolutely. And that is the beauty of it. So a lot of times you can use that medication to down regulate the symptoms. You can feel a little bit better, which is awesome, but it can be an and world. That's why I said it like that. Do not wait and let's see what happens. I'll try this first route. No, I'm no, please don't do that route.
Yeah.
And immediately do all these healthy things. And if anyone tells you that that's not going to make a difference, to say, okay, cool. You tell me what you know about, and then I'll get that other information for somewhere that I know that it does work.
Yeah. Also, it's not going to hurt you. Going back to adding in more healthy fats, God's garden, these kind of things, it's not hurting you. It's helping other parts of your bodies too. There was a follow-up to that question, was that they all grew up within 60 miles of each other. So Jeannie's always wondered if the location had anything to do with it. You never know.
It can. Like we see, like there's so many things. Like I know, I'm from the Northeast originally, Connecticut area, and we always knew that there was a high prevalence out in the Long Island area for cancer, and we
Oh,
never understand why. And
yeah.
so really, it was both sides of Long Island had water on it, and then they had massive power lines going up the middle. So it was a community for high level of electricity. So that interference was led to being like, hey, we might need to use different conducers around here, just different things. So where we grow up, that's environment. That's part of epigenetics. So yes, you need, and start thinking about it. We can always make the moment we decide to make those changes, and we take a little action, like that's when we start leveling up.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, the next one's from Lois here. Looking for more info on my autoimmune. Actually, I haven't heard of this one. Is this Sjögren's? How do I?
Yeah.
Yeah, Sjögren's syndrome affecting dry mouth and lips.
Yeah. So again, I think to some degree, this is a dermatome issue. This is affecting the autoimmune condition is affecting your skin, the fatty acid level. So very similar when I was talking to psoriasis. There. And again, we don't want to get too caught up in just the symptom. And that's one of the things, Karen, I'm hoping everyone takes away from this.
Yeah.
The specific symptoms, I'm telling you right now, especially when they're leaky gut derived, which most of them are, when that stuff gets out in the body, you can then have an autoimmune condition. Just depends on where it lands in the body. Or, like I said earlier, if you have a stealth pathogen, like Epstein Barr, loves your thyroid, loves the liver, so that could be the cause of it. So we then have to do all of these things. So again, if you have that, yes, like dermatrophin Pmg, and I'm going to mention an herb in just a moment here.
Yeah, well, let's go into that. We were kind of talking about four points or four kind of steps that we can take, or some things that we can do kind of for any of them in terms of general healing or symptom reversal. Action steps people can take if they're dealing with some of these things or think that maybe they are having some symptoms.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to give you four things, and I'm going to go back to number one.
Okay.
So there's really four action steps. And again, let yourself listen. If you know you have an autoimmune condition, go find a perfect strategy for this. But this strategy right here, what I'm going to give you is an outline for all of it. So number one, got to get your diet right. I'm going to come back to this one and get real specific there. Number two, got to heal the intestinal wall. Absolutely, positively. So that has to be an intentional approach. So that's a huge part. Just cleaning your diet does not heal your intestinal wall unless you got several years to do it. That's how long it'll take, because you're still going to be beating it down. Third one is you got to reduce and or remove the absolute best you can, the toxins. Toxins. That means the glyphosate. That means the GMOs. That means the unnecessary medications. Necessary medications to me are usually the ones that are the difference between life and death. And then the fourth one, we got to boost the immune system. If you have an autoimmune condition, so listen, it's tricky. Some people will say, no, don't boost the immune system. You're having an autoimmune condition. No, we've got to boost up the innate immune system, which means that we have to get the body healthier. We got to supply the tools that the body is going to need to heal. So, anything that gets us back to enhancing the innate wisdom of the human body, that is always the goal. Remove the interference, remove the inflammation. All right, so back to the diet, so it can be a little specific for you folks with autoimmune conditions tonight. So number one, diet is we got to get rid of pro-inflammatory foods: carbs, sugar, high fructose corn syrup, alcohol, gluten. If you did that and you got an autoimmune condition, you're ahead of the game. You're way ahead of all the statistics that are out there about autoimmune. And that's what I want you guys to understand. If you have an autoimmune condition and you read Google and you hear all the things that could go wrong, they're not doing that. They're not getting rid of sugar, simple carbohydrates, getting rid of GMOs, getting rid of gluten, getting rid of high fructose corn syrup and alcohol. All of those are pro-inflammatory. So you got to do the best that you can there. The second best diet meal plan, I'd say, follow something along the lines of a Mediterranean and or paleo. Both of those are, pretty good highs in fats and stuff like that. And that's really what we want. Number three is the high fat. And then number four, herbs. This is what can really, really, really be very, very beneficial, Karen.
Yeah, so you had good ones that you have everybody on if you've got autoimmune.
Yes, if you got autoimmune, remember what I started here, and I said that we have interference and we got inflammation. The number one that I want everyone on is something called Rheumania. Rheumania is an incredible herb. I have two versions. I use one in liquid, that's bold, like it's liquid herb. There's a Rheumania complex. It's bound with a couple other herbs. Herbs work incredible when they're synergistic. You use this herb with this herb, and I'm not that smart to figure it out. I leave that to other people. Then I use what they kind of come up with. There's something I use called Rheumania complex. If you have an autoimmune condition, get on Rheumania, period. Now we want to work on purely focusing on inflammation. Number one, turmeric. Number two, I'm going to tell you, there's two more here: green tea or a green tea extract. And number three, ginger. You could hammer that in your diet. Like you could get really, really good with those. If you're not going to be, this is well, I don't know. I'll try. I had some turmeric last week. Get it in your body every single day. Autoimmune people, you're fighting inflammation on a daily basis. Yeah. And we want to give your body every tool. So I don't say just turmeric. I'd say turmeric, green tea extract, and ginger. So ginger's like this super weapon for the gut. Like talk about the number one thing you can do for gut inflammation. Boom, ginger.
Wow. Okay.
At our cafe, we have these 2-ounce ginger shots.
Oh.
Something in your gut that was inflamed. When you're done with this 2-ounce live, we press it that morning. You get it that afternoon. Whatever it was, it's no longer there, which is cool.
Oh my gosh, I want to come so much. If you guys are in that Seagrove Beach area or passing through, make sure you go and check out Dr. Bart's All Organic Cafe. You've got all organic, 100% gluten-free, no canola oil, pretty much just everything exactly like you want to eat it, right?
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. And again, and part of us doing that is one, to show people that it's doable. And two, we want to, we're hoping that this inspires other, restaurant purveyors to raise the bar, because food, when people say it's too hard to eat organic, no, it's not. It might not be important enough yet, but it's not too hard. It's doable. So listen, has it been a little challenge for the entire restaurant to be 100%, gluten-free, it's been a challenge, but not one we couldn't tackle. So, all right, Karen, do we got any more questions here? I want to be privy to time.
Yeah, I think, no, that's just, thank you. I think we have, we are so blessed to have Prima Cafe, yay. No, that's all our questions. So we've always got our last question though. We have to leave people with it. What is, we've gone through a ton of stuff, but what's one action step our listeners can take right away to move them closer to their goal of becoming superhuman?
Yeah, so I had to answer this 3 weeks in a row.
Yeah, I know.
So this week I'm unprepared, but the first thing that comes to me, especially in this conversation, is that to honor thy innate wisdom within the body. Trust it, respect it, love on it, get closer with it, do anything and everything you can to continue to get that communication, that mind body, that, the above down, inside out type of communication taking place, because ultimately the closer we get back to that, that's when the real healing takes place. Yeah,
love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, guys. And thank you, Dr. Bart. I learn something every show. So hopefully you guys have got a ton of value out of that. And we will be back at the same place, same time next week.
Awesome. And again, thank you guys. Keep doing your thing, and especially on a show like this, if you have the opportunity to share it out or, continue to spread the love, keep doing so. And as usual, we're going to continue to level up, always taking deliberate action for our mind, for body, for overall wellness. Y'all be awesome.